We have some oat milk in the fridge.
How is oat milk? I haven't
It's
tried
good.
it.
It tastes like the milk in your cereal bowl after you've eaten your cereal.
I mean, that's like the best kind of milk,
That
right?
is the best milk. The only reason why I eat cereal.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I'm joined, as I am every week, on this fair program by two wonderful people, Bailey Perkins. Hello.
Hello, Andy.
And Scott Melson. How are you?
Man, I'm feeling very safe, very measured, and very data driven today.
You are feeling snarky. I feel like those are direct attacks at our commentary on the state of COVID in Oklahoma.
No, that's not a thing I would do.
Not good. That's the state. The state of our state is not well.
No, man, it's safe, measured, and responsible and data driven. That's how I feel today.
Well, I'm feeling black, so happy Juneteenth.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you.
Juneteenth, Bailey. Happy Juneteenth.
That's right. So today is June 19th that we're recording this. It is Juneteenth, which I think this is exciting, Bailey. I think you do too, based on what you just said. A quick scroll of social media today, it looks like the whole world woke up and was like, oh, hey, this is a real holiday. And I have seen and received emails from not like every pizza joint and stuff yet, but a ton of businesses are closed today. A bunch of folks are starting to recognize Juneteenth as a holiday.
And contrary to popular belief, people found out about it before President Trump tweeted about it. So,
You mean he didn't make it very famous?
he did not make it very famous. There are a few of us who knew about it. So.
Right. It's been a state holiday, a statutory state holiday in the state of Texas since 1980. So it's been almost, it has been 40 years. Whoa.
And rightfully so. The weather is here. It is thundering today.
Yeah.
Well, and the roots of Juneteenth, for those who are listening who don't know, derive from Texas. A Union general came down in 1965 to Galveston, Texas, because they finally had the manpower to be able to tell Texans the Emancipation Proclamation was put into place 2.5 years ago, and those who are enslaved now need to be free. And so for a lot of people, it marks an official end to slavery because there were folks enslaved in Texas 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was put into place. So,
which is, I mean, just bananas. And I mean, definitely like adds insult to injury. Can you imagine being a slave then and finding out you're free, which is huge, and then kind of calculating being like, well, I've been free for 2 years? Like, what the hell is going on?
Well, I mean, on a personal, like I mentioned last week, like my great great grandfather was freed because of because of the Union general and Union soldiers telling Texas, listen, you need to do this. So it's really special for a lot of people who may have descendancies of those who were enslaved in Texas, like me. So.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle has a new little 30-minute special thing out. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but I
did watch it. Yeah.
It's a relatively new. I mean, it's since the murder of George Floyd. So he's talking about race. It's not really a comedy bit. I mean, he makes a few jokes because he's a comedian, but it's really his kind of response, and it's pretty interesting. But he mentions that he's his great grandfather was a slave, and that connection. And I think that's an important history. I think I said this last week to you, Bailey, right? Like for most people I know, right? Like most white people know slavery happened, but they don't feel like they know any slaves. Like that's a long time ago. And as we talked about last week and again today, recognizing that is a much closer to where we are now, right? That is the case. Like that's how most Black people arrived in America, was because their ancestors were stolen from their homes and enslaved and brought over here. And so I think that makes it, I don't know, it feels more salient and like hits in a different way. And that's clearly what America needs, right? Is to be hit in a different way.
Absolutely.
I was, preparing for the episode, and so kind of refreshing on the history of Juneteenth. And um, one thing I've seen on social media a lot this last week or so is people asking, like, okay, wait, this is a holiday? I didn't know about it. Why didn't I know about it? And also, now that I know, why is there a 2-year gap in there from when the Emancipation Proclamation was read on January 1st, 1863,
Three.
until they came in June of 65? And what you said, Bailey, is right. Like, there's a few, maybe not rumors, but possible explanations for the delay. One is that the Union Army and even just some, like white soldiers and folks in Texas were going to allow this, that feels like a weird word, but basically force the slaves to work one more cotton season so that the plantation owners would have that labor there for one more year. So they didn't do it until after the 1864 cotton season. Another explanation is that the Union Army didn't have enough soldiers to make it all the way to Texas until General Granger brought them down. That's possible. And then certainly there's just the kind of latent explanation that folks in Texas didn't want to do it. And as we all know, Texas has a unique history with the United States where they're the only state that joined the Union under a compact, under an agreement, not by being kind of brought in the way other states were. And so I could see where the state was just like, nah, we're just not going to listen to you for a while until they felt like they had to. So some combination of that, it could be any of those, could be all of those, is why there was a big delay before this.
And it's also rumored that there were attempts to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And people were assaulted.
Right, yeah.
So the word couldn't get there. So
yeah.
even when there were attempts, like
messengers were killed. Yeah.
Yeah, the messengers were killed. Like, Texas did not want to free the slaves. It was, you're going to have to force me to do it. So it's a part of our history that we have to be reminded of, that many of the freedoms we experience, but also the things that we have so far to go into, tie back to these histories.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
And yeah.
When I worked for the state of Texas 10 years ago or so, it was really interesting because Texas has a bunch of state holidays. They're not federally recognized holidays, but as state employees, we got off. And so Juneteenth was one of those. But also, so was LBJ's birthday. And I was like, that feels weird.
That sounds very Texas.
Yeah.
So.
And I imagine someday, that George W. Bush's birthday might be one as well. I don't know that he had the same contribution to our history as LBJ, but there's that. But then also, I didn't work there in January, but in researching for today's episode, I discovered that what they call Confederate Heroes Day or Confederate Memorial Day is a state holiday, and it's celebrated in a bunch of southern states, but on different days. And in Texas, it's January 19th, which is the day before Martin Luther King Day. And I was like, holy crap. Like, okay. And I tweeted about this. I was like, for one, Oklahoma, like, we need to get on the stick and make Juneteenth a state recognized holiday here. Like, we could do that next session, get that knocked out. Also, Texas needs to get the other one off the books. Like, that has no business being a state holiday.
Well, with Arkansas, they have Robert E. Lee Day and Martin Luther King Day at the same time.
Yeah.
And so there's been ongoing pushes to separate those two holidays at the very least. And there's folks who are even pushing to not recognize it at all. And it's baffling that, like, you have the cognitive dissonance of, we want to celebrate, this part of, heritage, but then we want to hold on to some of the most awful parts of
Right.
what people call heritage, and so it's very strange.
It's just really bizarre to me, right? Like, I mean, obviously, like you cannot, nor should you try like to separate from the Confederacy, like the fact that it was founded to try and protect slavery, right? Like that's like the reason for its existence. But then this like that like again, and you can't set that aside, but like the veneration of these people even apart from that, right? Like England doesn't have a George Washington Day, right? Like or like a
Right.
right, like they committed treason, right? Like they were traitors, right? I like it's
And
a
there are
cap,
people
it's a
who love this country
right.
that
It's
still
a
carry around the flag of the
Confederacy, like it's a
Confederacy that was defeated by America, right?
right, like it's
Or
a
the
I mean the
Union. So
capital crime. I think that treason is like the one crime that's spelled out in the Constitution as like being a capital offense, right? Like and then yeah, and then all these people that like go on about patriotism and yet they venerate like these guys that were traitors to their country, and not only were they traitors to their country, but they were traitors to their country for this like awful cause.
Well, and it's like the conversation I saw yesterday on Twitter about renaming military bases that are currently named after Confederate
yeah.
soldiers or generals or whatever. And people are like, oh, it's, again, erasing our history. And I use the example that many others have. It's not like Germany's got Adolf Hitler Air Force Base floating around, right? Like, just because it happened doesn't mean you have to name something after the person, right? Like,
that means when you commemorate, that means you celebrate. That means you're celebrating the people that you're naming something after. So you're not even teaching people, the full history of the role they played in what made them part of history. You're just saying that they're worth noting and commemorating. So it's not even teaching people about history. It's truly celebrating some racist, vile folks who were part of Black destruction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's the cognitive dissonance is real. It really is.
And I mean, it's not like anyone's proposing naming Robert E. Lee Memorial Landfill or anything. That at least would be a little closer to the sentiment, right?
Right. Well, and I think part of it is people are like, well, it's okay because it was so long ago, but like as we've already established, it wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Right. Like we're like
and it's
we're
not
only
okay.
We're only a few generations. Right. I mean, it wouldn't even, I mean, if it was 1,000 years ago, it still wouldn't be okay. Right. But like we're like 4 generations removed. Right. So one, it's like just wrong at every like moral level. 2, it's treason. 3, it's not that long ago. Like the justification doesn't hold water at like any level.
No.
Because when you think about even like the Tulsa Race Massacre, like people have recently passed away within the past few years who were survivors of that massacre. Like, we're not talking about some random, I mean, it's to the point where there are people who couldn't talk about it for a long time, right? Because there's that much trauma put into the community for these situations. I mean, there's so many stories like Tulsa that have happened all over the country. I read one of my friends posted about there are 69 school age men. I think they were like high school students, and their area was burned. So all of them died in that. And that happened in Arkansas, right? Like, these are real stories that happened by people that we want to commemorate and like name buildings after. Or they were at least part of those institutions that were committing these heinous crimes, right?
Right.
I mean, hell, Alfalfa Bill Murray, right? Like they just took OSU just took Bill Murray's name off of a building today.
And
right?
Yes.
Right. And we still have Alfalfa County, and we still have Murray County, and we still have Lake Murray.
He's got 2 counties.
And we still have Murray State College, right? For this guy that was, I mean, I didn't know him, but seems like he was a pretty like shit human being.
Because the
is
first
what
law in Oklahoma's books was not slavery, or segregation, right?
like
Like this is the legacy this man has created, and we want to uphold that by naming and continuing to name buildings after him. So I'm excited to see this movement of changing what we've normalized, and it's making some people mad, but I think it's really hitting home the fabric of how entrenched racism is in everything that we do. Because I hear all the time, everything's not about race, but it is. And now you're seeing it firsthand with all of these changes that are happening, because it's become so invisible in our day to day that like it's overwhelming for people to see that, like, how entrenched it is, right? So that it's truly an awakening, and I hope that like um, folks who don't get it will soon get it, because they're going to have to get it, because these changes are going to continue happening. So
Right. It's not like we have a lack of good, if I mean legitimately excellent people to name things after, right? Like we named it after this guy whenever, way back, and we can change things, right? Like God gave us erasers and chisels. Like we doesn't have to be that way forever just because it is. I'm always an opponent to the phrase that we've always done it that way. Well, let's look at what's the best thing to do, the best way to do it, not just how have we always done it. Because if that's the case, like we'd still be riding horses or something, like there's lots of better ways to do things.
like Andy, Margot needs to see something different.
Yeah.
When you take her around when she grows up, you should be able to point to a building, a structure, something around her, and be able to proudly communicate why this thing exists or why it's commemorated in the way that it is.
Yeah.
And there are places where you may have to have a hard history lesson for her, right? And that's not okay. And most people aren't having the hard conversations when they see these Confederate monuments. That's just not what's happening. They're not educating them about what the Confederacy did to Black folks.
So. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with Ashley the other day about like I remember this book that I read in like 5th or 6th grade or something, and it was a ghost story book about like a Civil War battlefield or something. But like I was thinking about it and like remembering back, and like this was a freaking children's book that was freaking Confederate propaganda that was talking about like, oh, you don't call it the Civil War, you call it the war between the states. And it really didn't have anything to do with slavery. It was really about like states' rights. It was real. And like, I was in 5th grade.
It reinforces belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right? And it's like, this garbage is everywhere.
Yes. It is everywhere. So.
It is really fascinating being a parent in these times. And Bailey, I know that your partner has a daughter, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have some of the same exposure. And Scott's a pediatrician, so he gets it probably in huge doses. But like talking with my kids about this as they're experiencing it in real time, in whatever, through the lens that we try to give them, which is not to hide it from them, but to talk through it. But to have them be children and their experience in the world, and like trying to match that up with like what's going on in like the adult realm, and they're just like, what the hell is wrong with you guys? Like, why is that the case? And so when we've got books about Martin Luther King and Frederick Douglass and like, Black heroes, as well as, I don't know, I guess we've got some white hero ones too, but like try to have a diverse bookshelf for the kiddos, right? Yeah. And they don't see it as a diverse bookshelf. They see it as a bookshelf, right? And so when I like try to like talk to them about it, they're always like, yeah, I don't understand why this is an issue. And I was like, thank God. Like, because it is, you will encounter it. I am preparing you now for what will happen all too soon, right? When that other kid makes a comment and makes a joke and you feel like you're supposed to laugh at it. You don't have to. You can say, that's wrong, that's racist, don't make those jokes, right? Like, and I wish that I had had more of that when I was a kid.
Yeah,
You know,
because it's so important to change the norms in the culture and the things that we do on a day to day. It's things as small as like not laughing at a racist joke.
right,
Move this forward. So
right.
absolutely.
A quick aside, and we can move on to our next topic. But
Yeah.
it's not about race, but it's about cruel jokes. I remember in 8th grade in my English class, we had a unit on Helen Keller, and my teacher, who was a nice lady, but she started off the unit by saying, "Okay, go ahead and get him out." And we were like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "I know some of you know some Helen Keller jokes. Let's go ahead and get them out of the way so we're not whispering about them the whole unit." And we're all like, "What are you talking about?" So of course, one kid knew all these jokes, and she let him tell them to the whole class, and like they were forever burned in my mind. And even then, I was like, "This seems not okay."
Right.
But when you're like 14 or 13, what do you're not like,
So as opposed
Yeah.
to you shouldn't tell these kinds of jokes
right,
because they're horrible and offensive. Instead, it's okay. Well, tell them now
in a
To
safe
so you
expose
don't
space.
tell them
everybody.
again.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I was,
And not put it in the context of why this is awful. Like,
if he had just told him, he would have gone to the principal's office like in any other class kind of thing. And I remember like just coming home and talking to my mom about it and being like, so
Some
in
crazy shit
English,
just happened in English.
yeah, in English, she let Ryan tell these jokes and like, I don't know. And, my mom was like, that's weird, or, like not okay. And I was like, yeah, but it has haunted me ever, 35 years later, or however, 25 years later. All right. Well, speaking of history defining things,
Or speaking of horrible things that are everywhere,
both
coronavirus.
and a giant rally in Tulsa. So as I'm sure most of our listeners know, tomorrow, June 20th, will be a campaign rally for President Donald Trump in Tulsa at the BOK Center. This is his first rally since coronavirus gripped our nation. It is, I think, the largest event of any kind in America since the lockdown started in mid-March, right? Like we've canceled all public sporting events, all that has stopped. This is really the first big thing. And up until now, big things have been like well-attended funerals, right? And like busy bars. And Scott, how is that working out for us so far?
So God, it's I was
it's not. That's the answer. It's not working.
Right. In preparing for the pod today, I was trying to think how to like couch this because I think that it's really easy to fire off a tweet about like this is a disaster and incompetence and like terrible and oh my god what's happened, like that's really easy to do and not entirely inappropriate honestly, but I do think it's important, I think, to try and put some nuance onto this a little bit. And I think if you listen to the show, you probably want to hear a little bit more nuance. So here's my take for what it's worth. So, we had 352, I think, new cases today, 450 new cases yesterday. Our 7-day average is up to 265. It was previously 175 like 3 days ago. Hospitalizations are starting to trend up, though not nearly as dramatically. So I think it's clear that we are in a second spike, which we had alluded to the last couple of weeks, even though the numbers were not quite this dramatic. There are a couple of things, though, that make this I've heard some people say like we're right back, and I've been guilty of this too, right? Like we're right back where we were 2 months ago, but that's not really true, right? So one, as I think we talked about last week, to compare testing now and like positive tests now to positive tests at the beginning of the outbreak is a little bit of apples to oranges, because we are in fact testing so much more now, right? So as I didn't go back and calculate this because I didn't have time today, but as I recall, when we first started seeing, case counts of 150, 175, 200 a day at the beginning of the outbreak, we were having a test positivity rate, meaning the percent of tests that were positive was like 10, 12% at the beginning, which is really high. Like high enough that, if you ask epidemiologists, they would say, okay, we know that doesn't represent the true prevalence of disease. That means that, like, one, we're having a positive bias in whom we're testing. We're testing people that we think are very likely to have the disease, and so that's being confirmed a high percentage of the time. Whereas I think yesterday our positivity rate was up to about 4%, where it had been below 2%, right? So we're getting drastically higher numbers of positive tests with a significantly lower positivity rate. That's because we're testing a lot more people, right? So you can't look at the 365 today and 450 yesterday and compare that to the 200 a day at the beginning of the outbreak and say, oh, well, this means that now it's twice as bad as it was, right? It really is just a reflection of the fact that we weren't testing enough at the beginning, and our numbers then were certainly pretty dramatically underestimated, right? So that's the first thing, the first kind of bit of context. The second bit of context is, it is true that hospitalizations at this point have not increased at the same rate or to the same level as positive tests. Now, hospitalizations are a lagging indicator, right? So that's the first thing. So we won't know about hospitalizations from numbers we're seeing of the past couple of days till probably a week from now. So that's, it's a lagging indicator to be sure. However, we have now seen, I think, before the big spike the last couple of days, we've seen a fairly steady increase in positive test results for about the last week to 10 days. And the hospitalizations, while they're starting to trend up, have not gone up at the same rate. One of the reasons for that appears to be that a large proportion of these new infections are folks that are younger, specifically in the 18 to 35-year-old demographic. There's been a lot of buzz about this on social media that, okay, well, this kind of spike is okay because it's young people. And there's been some pushback on that, like, well, young people can still spread it to older people, and young people can still get sick, so it's not okay. And I would actually say that the correct answer is yes. Like, both of those are true, right?
Right.
I think it is at once 100% true that all these folks that are 25, 26, 28, 30, 31, 32, they can 100% get this and spread it to multiple people. And in fact, you could make the case that they're more likely to do that because they don't get as sick, right?
And they move around a lot more.
Right. So that is 100% true. And so it's not like, oh, this is not a big deal because it is young people. However, the other thing that is also true is that by and large, young people seem not to get as sick with this disease. They don't need to be hospitalized as often. And they don't need certainly to be in the ICU and ventilated as often. It can 100% still happen. So don't think if you're 30, you should just go have like a Corona party with a bunch of your friends and get it, because you could wind up on a ventilator. And
you mean I can't go to the bar?
Right? Like, you can wind up on a ventilator, you can have a stroke, you can have some combination of both of those things. Like, you don't want this thing. But most people who are in a younger demographic who get this seem to do pretty well and don't require advanced medical attention. That matters because one of the big concerns, you guys will remember a couple months ago, even though a couple months ago feels like it was 10 years ago, one of the big concerns when this first started happening was overwhelming the healthcare system, right? And that is less likely to happen with a surge in cases of people that are 18 to 35 than a surge in cases of people that are 60 to 75 or even 50 to 65, right? So it's not like this is not a good situation at all, right? Like, we need to get a handle on it, but it's also like, I think that there's probably still some time that we could take some steps to keep this from getting worse. We've also, in the last 2 months, I think our hospitals have done a good job of, stockpiling testing kits, stockpiling PPE, developing plans for surge capacity. So I think we are more prepared to handle a spike than we were at the beginning when this kind of came and, bit us on the ass, right? However, in my opinion, we should still be taking pretty strong steps to make sure that we nip this in the bud where it is.
Because the goal is not to have a prepared healthcare system to address a massive need.
Right.
Like, that's not the goal. Like,
right.
And hopefully what happens tomorrow won't trigger that need in the next few weeks.
Right. And that's the thing, right? That's the other huge X factor, right? Is we're going to have something happen tomorrow that hasn't happened to my knowledge. I mean, I can't say it hasn't happened anywhere in the world, because I think, Andy and I were talking the other day. I guess there have been some countries that have kind of continued to have soccer games and things. But certainly in the United States, there has not been a gathering like this since coronavirus started. And so tomorrow we're going to take 20,000 people or 40,000 people and pack them into a couple indoor arenas. And I would bet you that a big chunk of those people from all over the country, and I bet a bunch of people, they're not going to have masks. A lot of them I think are probably not going to wear masks. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe footage of the rally tomorrow will show 20,000 people with masks and face covers. And if that happens, then power to those people, I guess.
I saw a video or a photo of a little kid dressed like Donald Trump selling face masks with little American flags all over him. So someone's capitalizing on the need for masks.
And again, even if you could say that every single person was going to be wearing a mask and putting the hand sanitizer on, I probably still wouldn't go. But I think that definitely does bring the risk down.
Because you're definitely not social distancing.
Right.
No. Well, and that's so they're opening the doors way early, right? People have been in line already. Supposedly they got sent home last night by the police with the curfew situation, but they're back today. And so they're going to open the doors 6 hours ahead of time or something. And they're going to be in there, and it's a 4-hour deal. And there's 19,000 seats in the Bank of Oklahoma Center. And then there's a convention center across the street that they're going to use, and it holds several thousand. I've heard 40,000. I've heard 9,000. I don't know what the answer is, but multiple thousands more. And so you're going to have all those people together. And if you've been, crammed in, talking, breathing on each other,
chanting,
yelling, singing,
right? There's some tambourines involved, perhaps. And anyway, so potential for spread. So Scott, you and I were kind of estimating based on the numbers from a week ago, which were much lower.
Right.
Out of 19,000 people, right? There's likely a couple hundred that are infected at any given time. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into this, but are you doing math right now?
Yeah. So I mean, if there's 19,000 people in the arena, right? And our positivity rate is about 4%. So let's say that that's still an overestimate, and the actual prevalence is about 2%. So we're going to say that if 2% of people going to this tomorrow have it, that means 380 people with coronavirus are going to go to this, right? Now, if each of those 380 people, if they infect even just 2 others, right?
That doubles, yeah.
Well, that's almost 800 infections from this one event, right? And we will see that in the data in about 2 weeks. So just as a reminder, it's not going to show up on Monday, right? People may get tested, but I don't know do we even know how long it takes before it shows up in the tests?
So that's an excellent question. I will tell you that I'm advising patients who are asymptomatic, but worried that they have an exposure or have had a known exposure. I'm advising them to get tested about 4 to 5 days sooner if they develop symptoms. But if their exposure was 4 to 5 days previous and they have not developed symptoms, that's when I advise them to get a test, because the mean onset of symptoms is about 4 to 5 days. I should say the median onset of symptoms is about 4 to 5 days. So the 5-day mark, if you have an exposure and you have not developed symptoms, that's when I advise people to get tested. Certainly, if you develop symptoms, you should get tested when you develop symptoms.
So we might see by the middle of next week some of the first symptomatic people stumble in and get tested, right? And then increasing over the following week and a half, right? So, and then
assuming that they go to the health department to get their test, and I believe that's taking about a 48 to 72 hour turnaround right now. So you get 5 days, 5 days median to develop symptoms. You get tested on day 5, 6, day 7 of, your second or third day of symptoms. That comes back 3 days after that. So now you're at day 10, 11, 12, and there you are, right?
Yeah. My sister got tested last week, and they told her 5 to 7 days, but I think she got results in 3 or 4. Like,
They're telling people 5 to 7 days, but I mean, I've been sending the vast majority of my patients who, you know, call and are like, I want to be tested or I need to be tested. I send to the health department to have it done, and they're getting results in about 72 hours.
and I'm sure that 4 to 5 day is to build in
A
a
buffer.
buffer,
Right.
for slowdowns and to give you, like, as medical personnel, some time to respond to all these phone calls, knowing you got other stuff going on. Well,
And in this conversation of COVID, a day or two ago, Lincoln Riley announced that there were a few OU football players who were either exposed or tested positive for COVID.
really?
Mm-hmm.
And OSU's had several players test positive as well. The Philadelphia Phillies baseball team, there were, I think, 8 positives at camp today.
Who? And baseball. Baseball is a social distancing sport.
Yes, it is.
It's a long way, right? Like,
Not in the dugout, it's not.
that's true.
That's true.
Even I love going to professional baseball games, and that's one thing I think I said to you, you guys, like, I've really wanted to go and like have a Chicago dog and just like, but I don't want anyone for like 50 yards around me. Like, I want a whole section, right?
Yeah.
And someone just to deliver hot dogs and beer to me with a mask on, and that's not going to happen.
You know,
but go ahead.
No, I didn't know. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I think I was done. That's okay.
Oh.
I'll just sit here quietly and think about hot dogs.
Just, specifically Chicago style. Man, I just cannot emphasize enough. And this is what I'm telling patients. This is what I'm telling friends. If you are leaving your house, wear a mask, right? If you're going to the store, wear a mask. If you're going to the grocery store, the liquor store, Walmart, Target, like if you're leaving your house, wear a mask. Now, possible exceptions are if you are doing an outdoor activity with members of your household and you can maintain a safe distance from people from another household, then like it would be acceptable not to have your mask on then. But otherwise, you need to have your mask on. I mean, Andy, I went over to your house briefly last night to take care of something, and we stood on the porch for 15 minutes chatting, and both of us had masks on, right?
And we were like 10 feet apart. Like,
yeah. Like
Scott, as he was leaving, got to his car, and he was parked 3 cars deep, and then he took his mask off, and so we shouted across the yard without masks.
So, just wear a mask and wash your hands. And for the love, if you're sick, please stay home.
Yeah. Okay. So I know someone whose colleague has to go on quarantine for 2 weeks because their parents, they were around their parents who have now tested positive. And so in between the time that they were exposed, in between the time they were tested and when they got results, right? So in that 72-hour period, 3-4 day period, they
went out and freaking partied.
They were symptomatic. They're like, I feel kind of sick. I should get tested. So they got tested, but didn't stay home. They went to like big family. They went to church, to like an event there. And then they had like a big gender reveal party with all their family. And then like next day found out they're positive. So they call their family and be like, hey guys, sorry, we have COVID. I'm sorry we hung out with you yesterday. And so like now all of their family and extended family all have to go get tested and stay home. And I was like, come on. Like, it's explicitly in the guidelines to not do that.
Right.
And that's how pandemics work. Like, where have you been?
And that's a really good point to make, right? Like if you get swabbed for coronavirus, whether you are symptomatic or not, now particularly if you are symptomatic, but even if you're not symptomatic, if you get swabbed because you have enough of a known, like if you have enough of an exposure risk that you need to be tested, you need to stay home, right? You should consider yourself to have coronavirus until the test comes back and says that you don't.
And even if you don't, you were sick. I don't want coronavirus. I also don't want like a cold, right? Like a cold sucks. I mean, it's not a cold in the summertime. Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
Having a fever when it's hot out. Bleh. It's your body's not built for that. And it's way safer than COVID. So, all right. Well, I guess tune in next week to see what we know.
What happens next?
Is there, I was thinking about it. Is there an election coming up? I feel like there
is an election
on the horizon.
on the
For
horizon.
some reason, June 30th is on my brain, and I just don't know why.
June 30th.
It is my sister's birthday and
Ah.
also an election. That's right, June 30th. So a week and a half from today is the Oklahoma primary election. Listeners, I hope that you are aware of this. If not, if you're a new listener, you just moved here from somewhere that didn't have elections, what an exciting time for you. Thanks for joining us. I would like to talk to you and find out how you found out about our podcast first. But also, please don't forget to vote. There are three
Where would they
ways.
have moved from?
I don't know.
I mean, even places that have sham, even freaking Putin gets elected, right? It's like fake, but there's still elections.
I was going to name several countries, and I realized I didn't know their status of their democracy, so I didn't name anybody. Right? I'm not sure. Somewhere else. There are plenty of authoritarian states out there that don't have real elections. Also, they are not listening to Let's Pod This. No one like comes to America and is like, I'm so glad I'm here. Look at this, a local podcast about Oklahoma politics. I will listen to that.
I will tune in.
You don't know. We have some downloads in Canada.
Well, but Canada has elections.
That's true.
I've not seen any news about Trudeau in a minute. Is he doing okay?
He actually suffered a major international embarrassment. He's been vying pretty hard for the last few years to get Canada a seat on the UN Security Council and lobbying pretty hard for it, and they didn't get it.
Oh, that is embarrassing.
Yeah, I believe it went to Finland.
That's even more embarrassing. Oh, sorry, JT. All right. So yes, back to the election that we're actually having here in Oklahoma on June 30th. You can vote three ways. There's three of us. Let's each divide it up. I'll take absentee voting.
Okay.
Bailey, do you want to do early voting?
I sure can.
And Scott, you do in-person day of voting.
Sure.
So you can vote absentee right now today from the comfort and courtesy of your own home. It is not too late. You have to request your absentee ballot if you haven't already. You have to request it by June 23rd, which is 1 week. So you've got 4 days from today. So you can do it over the weekend. Go to ok.gov/elections. Click on all the stuff that says absentee voter. It's really easy. You can request
by
it on
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock on the 23rd. They will mail you a ballot. I made videos about how to request it. If you're not sure, look up Let's Fix This on YouTube. There's videos on there. Go to our Facebook page. There's also a video about how to fill out your ballot. Well, I mean, you color in the box. That's pretty easy. But then how to package the ballots in that envelope and the other envelope, and then either notarize it or put your ID with it in the other envelope, and then you stamp it and you mail it. You can do it. You can sign up to vote absentee for one election or for all the elections for the rest of the year, which in this year is definitely recommended. I recommend you do it regardless. But
because once you're signed up for the rest of the year.
That's right. You can do it. And so you'd be already set up for November. There have been over 100,000 absentee ballots requested for this election, which is like 5 times higher than normal. That's very exciting. People are trying to stay safe, trying to vote super safe, both like from a biological standpoint and from an election fraud standpoint. So vote by mail, stay at home, super easy. It'll come right to you. If you don't have a copy of your ID and you need a notary to notarize your ballot, you can go to any bank, any credit union. You can do the drive-through. You can also hit me up. I'm a notary. I'll do it. Any tag agency will do it. But we can do like Scott and I did, where you just hand it out your door. We can both wear masks and you can hand it around the storm door. So I don't have to interact. I'll wear gloves and sanitize stuff. We can make it happen. So there's no excuse.
It's free, no charge.
No charge. I mean, you got to live nearby for me to go do it, but we can meet up or go to a bank near you. That's easier. And do it that way. So voting by mail is your first option. You can do it today. My ballot is filled out, signed, sealed, ready to deliver downstairs. I'm going to take it to the post office when we get done recording today. Okay, so that's your first option. Early voting is your next option. Bailey, take it away.
Yes. Can people see me, or are we just...
No, we're just going to do audio today.
Okay, cool. So the second way that you can vote is voting early. So let's say election day, you have a busy day at work, or your kids have a bunch of stuff going on and you just don't have the time to make it to your polling place. You can go to your county election board. And for those who live in Oklahoma County, it's right there off of 42nd and Lincoln, so down the street from the Capitol, in between the hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. next Thursday, June 25th, next Friday, June 26th, and then between 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday, June 27th, you can go there and vote early. Just remember to bring a federally issued ID or a state issued ID that has a picture of you on it, or you can bring the voter registration card that they mail to you with you as identification. Unfortunately, if you're a college student, that college ID is not going to work. So make sure that you request, and you can call the Oklahoma election board and ask them to mail you a new voter registration card. So ask them for that card if you don't have a license or a passport card or a tribal ID or a hunting permit, whatever, anything that government,
Medical marijuana card.
Medical marijuana card. It just has to be a state or federally issued ID that has a picture of you on it. Or I learned today, because I am trained to be a poll worker now. You can use if you have the app for the Oklahoma driver's license app. It's called what is it called?
I had the beta version, and then they pulled out of beta, and I haven't got the new version yet.
Well, if you have the OK Mobile ID app from the Oklahoma Department of Public Safety, you can pull that up on your phone, and you hit a little button that says press certify to show the seal, and you show that seal, and that counts as showing ID. So there's a few different ways. If you don't have an ID, don't feel like you have to turn around and go home. Ask for a provisional ballot, because everybody has a chance to vote. Because what they'll do is they'll just hold your ballot until they do all the research to make sure that your ballot is valid, and then it'll be counted into the tally. So bring those IDs with you even when you early vote. So
Bailey,
remember.
Did you mention that you can also use your voter registration card?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's the easiest way, and it's free. So call the county election board now this week and say, hey, can you mail me another voter registration card? Because they will mail that to you for free.
That's right. All right. So we covered absentee voting. We covered early voting, also known as in-person absentee, which is weird. But anyway, Scott, there's still the option to vote traditionally on election day.
Yeah, if you're playing it fast and loose with your health and the health of others, and you want to go vote in person on election day, you can do that. And I'll give you my how to show up and vote spiel, but I'm gonna add, for purposes of this year, if you would please wear a mask. Please wear a mask. Please wear a mask if you're gonna vote in person. Please also sanitize your hands right after you get out of the car.
And when you go to the poll, every person who's working the polls has to wear a mask, and there will be sanitizer there, but it's also great to bring your own.
Beautiful. You can, in fact, use your own pen. They have pens that they can supply. But again, to try and make sure that we keep everything as sanitary as possible, if you can bring your own pen, that would be great. So in order to vote in person, first, you have to know where your polling place is. I think if you're listening to this show, you probably know where your polling place is. But in the event that you don't, you can find it super easy. You can just go to this website called Google, and you can Google Oklahoma State Election Board, and that is going to take you to the website for the Oklahoma State Election Board. When you get to that website, you just scroll down, and on the left-hand side, there is a section called Quick Links. You click on under the Quick Links, there's a link to the OK Voter Portal, which is a super, super cool online tool that they have. You click on Oklahoma Voter Portal Access. You will type in your last name, and I'm doing this in real time just to prove to you that it works. You type in your first name, your last name, your date of birth, and click a button that says Find Me. When you get that, you can look in, you're taken to your voter profile. It has your voter ID number, your precinct, your party affiliation, and you can locate your polling place. You can look at the address for your county election board. You can view a sample ballot. You can also request absentee ballots. So you'd find the location of your polling place, and then you would know that on June 30th, you need to go to your polling place to cast your ballot. Bailey, polling place is open at 7, right? Is it 7
7
to
a.m.
7 to
7 a.m.
7?
to 7 p.m. And so
7
if you get there at 7 p.m., we cannot turn you away. Do not get there at 7:01 because we have to turn you away. And we can't give you a ticket to get in line. But if you get there at 7 p.m., we have to let you in line to vote.
And that doesn't mean that does not mean in the polling place, Bailey. That means in the line to get in the polling place by 7 p.m., right?
Yes, because one of the the poll workers have to give you a ticket to make sure that you were in line by the time the official phones for Oklahoma State Election Board says 7 o'clock. So when that says 7 o'clock and you're in line, you'll get a red ticket.
So then you'll go inside. You'll be given your ballot, and you will vote in all the races that you would like to cast a vote in. You do not, if there is a race that you don't feel comfortable voting for, like you don't know anything about the candidates, or you don't have strong opinions, or you didn't have time to do your research, and maybe you just didn't know this wasn't going to be on the ballot. You don't have to vote for everything, right? Don't think that your ballot is going to be like invalidated if you don't, know who you want to vote for in maybe a race that's a little bit more obscure. Vote for all the races that you feel comfortable with.
But take that time to look at that sample ballot at the website Scott gave, because you have the opportunity now to see what exactly is going to be on your ballot. So you have time to do your Google search, talk to people, do your research, because if you don't have to leave it blank, you don't want to leave it blank. You want to be able to weigh in on everything that you possibly can. So make an informed decision and do that research.
If you don't want your voice to count 100%, it doesn't have to, but don't you want your voice to count 100%?
Right.
You want to wield as much civic authority as you possibly can?
Absolutely.
I know I do.
It's gonna be, Bailey, you did the poll worker training, right?
Yes.
You're gonna be out there serving the people as a poll worker. How do you feel like it's gonna go?
It will be interesting because the Oklahoma Election Board is pretty overwhelmed right now. The person who was doing our training said that this primary election almost feels at the volume of the general election.
Yeah.
For many of the county election boards. And so they're getting high volumes of calls, a lot of people needing information. And then they're trying to balance CDC guidelines on how to set up the polling places, right? One of the things that was really interesting that they just found out this week. So if you were trained as a poll worker before this week, this is new information for you. But normally, if you check that driver's license, if you're going to bring your driver's license or that hunting license or whatever it is, check that expiration date, because if your license expires, typically they can't count that as a valid ID. But because of COVID, there's been an extension to where if your license expired after February 15th. So anytime between February 15th and now, you can still use that license as a valid ID because of all the closures and things that have been happening. So don't feel like you have to pay $30 or however much it costs to go get a brand new ID to vote and your license expired March 30th. You can use that. And if your poll worker tells you that's not valid, There should be a sign that says it is and point to that, or call the election board and said, hey, I was told this. Can you confirm for the poll worker so I can get my ballot? So they are doing the best they can as quickly as they can to keep people safe. So all of the poll workers will be wiping down the pens after each use. We'll have sanitary wipes and sprays to wipe down surfaces. But if you can, absentee vote. And also early vote. So that way you won't have to worry about that. But if you have to vote on election day, they're doing the best that they can to maintain social distancing guidelines and keeping people safe and sanitized in the locations. So,
y'all remember when you were kids and you had to take a utility bill to school to prove your address that you were in the right school district? Y'all have to do that?
I didn't have a utility bill, but I assume my parents did. I think you still have to.
Do you still have to do that? That's weird, man.
I don't know.
That's the only way to prove where you live?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my kids are in...
every year at enrollment, I had to get
a
water or electric bill from my parents and take it to school.
I don't know. Are they expecting that people are just like driving in from other places? It seems...
I don't know, man.
Like, to bring someone to school every day is a big headache for parents who live near the school. It's not like people are, by and large, like shipping them around the state. But
also, I have an update on Let's Pod This International Edition.
Yes.
Canada lost. There were 2 UN Security Council seats available. Canada lost to Norway and Ireland. Norway got 130 votes to be on the Security Council, Ireland 128, and Canada 108. And apparently this is quite the humiliation for our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau.
And what's the hate for?
So I guess the last time Canada was on the Security Council was in 2000, and I guess, obviously it's a big deal to have a seat on the Security Council. And I guess Norway and Ireland, amongst some other countries, have been working, they've been greasing the skids and lobbying, trying to justify that they deserve a seat on the Security Council for 15 years. And Canada's really only been doing it for since 2015 or 16. So they were behind the 8 ball. But apparently it's they look at whether or not they are contributing the required percentage of GDP for defense and peacekeeping missions. They look at how many troops they're sending around the world for peacekeeping missions. They look at what they're doing in terms of foreign aid. They look at all these kinds of things to kind of make the case that you deserve a seat on the Security Council. And I guess Canada, my beloved Canadian friends, didn't make the cut this time.
On a related international note, I will tell you, I'm looking at our stats. In the past 90 days, we've had 13 downloads in Spain, 10 in the UK, 4 in Canada, 4 in Mexico, 4 in Uruguay, 3 in Ireland, 1 in Australia, France, Germany, Indonesia, Iran, Australia, France, Germany, and Japan. Yeah.
So we need an international edition.
We do. I know who the Iranian person is. I don't know the rest though. So it's probably just how things got routed. All right. Well, as we wrap up, I know we said we're going to talk about interim studies today, but we're going to push that to next week because there's not enough time left today, and that's an evergreen topic for us to talk about. Plus, it gives us more time to prepare. But I do want to end on a note about our annual Predictorama trivia game that we do each year. This year was a bit special, right? So we had a fairly low participation rate in the game itself, which turns out to be okay because none of the bills that we had actually passed due to the COVID situation. Sadly, House Bill 2994 by Representative Grego, which would have legally defined milk as milk and milk products of a cow, goat, or other hooved mammal, did not make it, nor did the other 19 or so bills that we had out there for your predictive fun. When it comes down to the tiebreaker, oddly enough, Scott and I both guessed relatively high numbers in the 400 to 500 range. And it was really close. It came down to two people. Scott, I want to say you guessed there would be 423 bills that were signed into law. I guessed 287. It was under 200, I think, altogether. But we had two.
Not a big year for bills.
Not a big year, no. So we only had two folks. The two lowest were 87 and 45. So I guess I think the 87 one is closest, and that would have been James Craig, I believe, is who that person is that responded. So, James, if you're listening, congratulations on that. I think we should make them both winners. Don't you guys? I think it was a very low participation. It's really only the two of you.
I agree.
So let's James, and the other person is named T. Elmore. So I will email you both here in the next week and get your mailing addresses, and we'll send you a prize pack of some Let's Fix This swag. And congratulations on your win in a very odd year. We'll come back next year in 2021. Well, gosh, who knows what's going to happen in February, right? Like we could still have the same weird.
I'm not going to predict what's going to happen 2 weeks from now.
Right.
I'm not going to predict what's going to happen tomorrow.
No, that's exactly right. Holy moly. All right. Well, on that unpredictable note, let's end this episode. Bailey, thank you for being here as always.
Thank you, Andy.
Scott, thanks for being here, man.
Man, I wouldn't miss it.
All right, don't forget to subscribe and rate Let's Pod This on Apple Podcasts because that helps other people discover us. Don't forget to vote. Tell your friends. Maybe make your own sign and put it in the yard and say, there's an election on June 30th. Please vote. Remind everyone to find a way. Vote by mail, vote early, vote in person. Pick one of those. You can't do more than one. That's illegal. But pick one of those and definitely do it. Decisions are made by those who show up, and you've got to show up to vote. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Let's Fix This OK. Scott is at SC Melson. Bailey is at Bailey M. Perkins. I'm at Andy OKC. You can also send us an email at podcast@letsfixthisok.org. And our podcast is a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network. Our theme music is called Rhino Funk, and it is by artist Sodown. Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage the government. We encourage you to get involved any way you can. And as I said just a minute ago, decisions are made by those who show up. Have a great week.